Hello everyone, back tuning into today's first video. We're going to have a look at the weather for month ahead. For today's first video, it's JMA Friday, so as always on a Friday, we're having your detailed month ahead look ahead with the Japanese and CFS V2 models. We'll be back later on this afternoon with your week to 10 day video update, of course. But starting us off is JMA Friday. For this Friday. So we're going to begin by having a look at the 500 millibar height anomaly flowcharts from the JMA, and then we'll compare the JMA model output to the CFS V2 and see what both of the models are showing. For the month ahead, which pretty much takes us to the end of November now, with the sort of month ahead update. So this covers the full month of November. Of course, we will have your November forecast from Gazworthies tomorrow. Be the first video up tomorrow morning. The November 2018 month ahead forecast. Terry Scoley's November forecast was released yesterday, so you can have a look at that. And quite an interesting forecast, actually, going some colder weather later in the month. But you have to see what Gazworthies is predicting tomorrow. But as I say, starting us off is the JMA. So these are the 500 millibar height anomaly flowcharts from the North Pole down. So this is the North Pole of the Northern Hemisphere, just here, mid-latitudes, Northern Hemisphere around there. On these charts, blue is extrapolating to low pressure, and yellow, orange and red extrapolating to high pressure. They're broken down into weekly periods, so the first weekly period will take us from the 2nd through to the 9th of November. So for the coming week, we've got the below average heights out to the west of the country, and then we've got the above average heights with those orange colours over to the east. A big ridge to our east, a big trough to our west. We're stuck somewhere in the middle, bringing the air up from a southerly to southwesterly direction. So it's going to be mild in the week ahead, and probably quite unsettled, and particularly unsettled for the north and west, where we're bringing in these west to southwesterly winds. So unsettled but mild in the week ahead, driest conditions over in the east. Now this continues into week 2. This one takes us from the 9th through to the 16th of November. Subtle difference though, with the below average heights just that little bit further to our west, actually. The above average heights becoming that little bit stronger to our east. So we're still bringing up mild, or even perhaps even very mild air from a southerly type direction. It's not quite as unsettled though. There's more of an influence from the ridge over to the east. So there's still some rain likely out in the west, but many central eastern parts of the country would actually be fairly dry. Of course, bringing up a continental air, it's perhaps turning a little bit cooler, and you would probably have to think about frost and fog night and morning as well. Just a little bit more influence from that region. It's a very subtle difference, and it would only take a slight adjustment and we would still be unsettled even into week 2. So the first half of November is looking pretty mild here with the JMA. And then we go through to weeks 3 and 4. This takes us from the 16th through to the 30th of November, the last day of the month, and it all goes rather strange looking actually at this point. So there's not much to work with. There's no sign of anything happening particularly from either above or below average height point of view. It looks like we're probably just bringing in a straightforward westerly flow with maybe low pressure up to the north and high pressure down to the southwest. But to be honest, there's not much there to work with. That's a 2-weekly anomaly, so it could be like there's a transition going on. Maybe week 3 is very similar to weeks 1 and 2, and then week 4 does something very different, and so that's why as the 2-weekly anomaly you're coming out with that rather strange looking chart. But there's not much to work with there, so let's move along very quickly and have a look at the tropical and mid-latitude view. So we come back to week 1, which is the 2nd through to the 9th of November, and this one again, it has the below average heights out to the west of the country, and then we've got the above average heights over to the east of the country just there. British Isles in the top right-hand corner chart as you're looking at it, of course. And so we're bringing in this sort of westerly, southwesterly flow with low pressure out to west, or sort of southerly, southwesterly. Low pressure out to west, high pressure is over to the east of the country. I expect this to be quite mild. Indeed, that's what the JMA is forecasting for the week ahead, with above average temperature anomalies coming up there, quite substantially so actually, between 2 and 3 degrees above average. Most parts of Europe also having a very significantly warmer than average week, or milder than average week in the week ahead. Also unsettled, however, so precipitation anomalies are coming out above average, with those southwesterly winds feeding in bouts of rain. So mild and wet to start November. Then we move through to week 2. It's the 9th through to the 16th of November. Very similar, but again, we've got that area below average heights just moving that little bit further out to the west of the country, with the above average heights just extending in a little bit more from the east. The mean wind direction, rather than being southwest, is probably going more southerly, possibly a little bit southeasterly, and so it's still quite a mild wind direction, but as the air starts to get drawn in from the continent, it might be a little bit colder. You might start to get frost and fog beginning to develop. Now, the model is still going for warmer than average temperature anomalies, which is what you would expect, because it's looking at the overall weather pattern. It's looking at the sort of upper air soundings, and they'd be quite mild, really, with the air from a southerly southeast direction. Just down on the surface at this time of year, if you have an influence from high pressure extending in from off the continent and bringing the wind up from the continent in the middle of November, that is likely to be producing, at the very least, fog. You might get frost as well, and so it may not be quite as warm. If this comes off, as the model is predicting, it may not be quite as mild as that temperature anomaly is suggesting. But as it goes, the model is actually forecasting a substantially milder than average first half to November. Precipitation-wise, a little bit surprising actually. It's still coming out with slightly above average precipitation there. So it isn't seeing as much of an influence from that ridge extending in as it looked like you would have. So week 2 is a little bit of a puzzle, really, what's going on there. It does look as though, let's go back to the high time, it does look as though we have quite a strong influence from this ridge of high pressure just to our east. The low pressure below average heights definitely push further out into the Atlantic. You expect that to be a rather drier week, but the model doesn't really show that. So it wants a mild and wet first half to November. And then we go through to week 3 and 4, which is the 16th through to the 30th of November. And it all goes rather strange looking then. There's no real areas of high pressure or low pressure to be working with. So let's just see what the model is forecasting for temperature and precipitation. As far as temperature anomalies are concerned for weeks 3 and 4, they are lowering. So they're still a little bit milder than average, but they're definitely cooler compared to weeks 1 and 2. That's the case for many central parts of Europe as well. So it looks like as we get through to weeks 3 and 4, the second half of November, there's a little bit of a cooling trend there, although nothing particularly cold appearing. And precipitation-wise, still just a little bit above average. So it's going for quite an unsettled November here. From beginning to end, really, the precipitation anomalies are coming out above average. It's just have a very mild first half, and then the temperature anomalies return to something slightly closer to average, although probably still above average in the second half. Nothing really to be getting excited about if you're looking for cold weather there, I have to say. Right, so let's have a look at CFS V2, see how that compares. Again, these are 500 millibar heights. They're broken down into week periods. The first week period takes us from the 2nd through to the 8th of November. The coming week has the below average heights out in the middle of the Atlantic, with the above average heights over to our east. The flow and the jet is being brought in from a southerly to southwesterly direction, so mild and unsettled. The most unsettled conditions will be in the north and west. The driest conditions will be in the east and the southeast, but even there you will get some bouts of rain moving through. Then we go through to week 2, very similar to what the JMA is showing. This is from 9th to the 15th of November. That area of below average heights just getting pushed back that little bit further west into the middle of the Atlantic, as this area of above average heights builds in from the east and from the southeast. The flow of the jet is still coming up from a southerly type direction, so it's still quite mild, but probably a drier week that week. And if we do start to pull in some winds from off the continent, if we do start to get a little bit of a southeasterly tilt to the air, then of course that could start to turn things colder on the surface. Wouldn't be notable probably aloft, but on the surface it might start to turn things a little bit colder, with the risk of some frost and some fog coming along perhaps. Then we go through to week 3. This is the 16th to the 22nd of November, with above average heights to our south and east, and the below average heights probably strengthening a little bit out in the Atlantic. Means we start bringing more of a southwesterly flow, still mild, but probably starting to turn that little bit more unsettled again in week 3. And then we're through to week 4, which is taking us from the 23rd through to 29th of November. Above average heights in the central part of the Atlantic, below average heights between Scotland and Iceland, and that ridge that's been sitting just to our east-southeast is moving into more central and eastern parts of Europe, also beginning to extend back towards quite a blocking feature up here to the north. So turning more unsettled with that, you're bringing the winds in from off the Atlantic. A little bit cooler as well, as the air is coming out from the northern part of the Atlantic. So the air is coming down from sort of Greenland, that area of the North Atlantic. So cooler but more unsettled there as we're going into the final week of November. Again, nothing particularly cold showing up though. No sign of this colder second half of November that we have been anticipating and speculating about. There's absolutely no sign of that with JMA Friday today. These are the temperature anomalies. They're going to be pretty brutal if you want colder conditions. So this is week 1, taking us from the 2nd through to the 8th of November. And we're coming out with a warmer than average week for UK and Ireland, or milder than average, substantially milder than average for most parts of Europe as well. Week 2, which is the 9th through to the 15th of November, very much milder than average, substantially above average, around 2.5 to 3 degrees above average for England and Wales. Most parts of Europe, again, having a very mild week in week 2. Week 3, which is the 16th through to 22nd of November, that one is also forecast to be a lot milder than average, not quite as warm as week 2, but nevertheless still substantially above average. And then week 4, which is the 23rd through to the 29th of November, that one comes out just a little bit above average. So there's a bit of a cooling trend there through the final week of November, but still above average. And no sign, as I say, no sign whatsoever in either of these two models, really, of that cold second half to November that we have been thinking might be a possibility this year. Precipitation-wise, so it looks like this for week 1, takes us from the 2nd to the 8th of November. That one is showing slightly above average precipitation. Western parts of the country, a little bit drier than average in the east and southeast. So a classic sort of northwest-southeast split for precipitation in week 1. Week 2 looks like that. Again, very close to average for England and Wales, above average for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Most parts of Europe coming out very dry during week 2. Week 3, again, a little bit of, above average with precipitation in the north and west, nearer to average elsewhere. And then week 4, very much the same. This is the 23rd through to 29th of November, and that one comes out above average for rainfall just for the northwest country, elsewhere close to average. So, there's really nothing to get excited about if you want cold weather in November. So, let's just say that off the bat. If the JMA and CFS V2 models are right, this November is a write-off for cold weather, and there will be very little frost or snow if these two models are correct. Now, I think they've got it probably right for the first half of November, so I do think the first half of November is going to be quite unsettled at times, particularly for the north and west, and it's also likely to be pretty mild as well. Probably a drying trend as we go through next week, but overall unsettled in the northwest, driest in the south and southeast, and temperatures are looking mild through the first half of November. The second half is more of a puzzle. If these two models are correct, then basically we just keep it quite mild and probably turn things a little bit more unsettled again in the second half of November. But let's wait and see. That's a little way off, and I have a feeling, because it's been a trend over the past few months, that the first halves of the months have tended to be milder than the second half. It's tended to be in the finals of week to 10 days over recent months that we've had the coldest weather of the month. So I have a feeling that in the second half of November we will probably get something colder. But obviously, if the models don't start showing that soon, then there will be some doubt about that. So as it stands at the moment, JMA Friday is forecasting a very mild November. But we shall see what happens in the second half of the month. These models these models are very experimental. They're prone to chopping and changing. So it might look rather different next week. Right, we'll be back this afternoon with your week to 10 day look ahead, so come back for that then. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching.